Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Lockdown Dads. My name's Ian Dinwiddie. I'm the founder of a coaching business called Inspiring Dads that helps stressed dads to balance work and fatherhood. I've got two children. I've got an 11-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son.
And I'm James Miller, editor of workingdads.co.uk, author of Dads Don't Babysit, which I've forgotten to put on the shelf. I used to have that on the shelf all the time when I did the. I was sat here for a while and I forgot about that. And also a father of two different children. And we are joined today by Ethan Salathiel, coach, consultant, living system. I am one of the above as well, only one of the above, and also a father of two as well. Thanks for joining us, Ethan.
My pleasure. Lovely to be here. Thanks very much for having me, James and Ian.
Let's start with the question that I don't know. Maybe it's becoming easier to answer these days. I don't know, but it's been a tricky one over the last year. But it seems straightforward, but it's not. How are you, Ethan?
Yeah, it always seems quite a loaded question, doesn't it? I totally understand. I'm good. I'm the ultimate kind of optimist. Lockdown sort of had highs and lows, but I think that we're coming out the other side now, and as a family, very positive. My wife and I, in sort of what we've been through. But yeah, I mean, we at the beginning of the crisis, my wife was heavily pregnant, so she's in her second and then third trimester, and then my son, my second child, was born at the end of July. I can't believe it. He's nearly 9 months old now. I think 9 months tomorrow, actually. So there was great anxiety and stress at the beginning, being worried about the pregnancy, and it was also an IVF pregnancy, so that kind of had an additional level of challenge associated with keeping her safe and the baby safe. But now that little Zachary's here, he's just been a whirlwind and a joy, and it's all of that sort of worry and negativity has turned into absolute positivity. And it's been similar on the work front, actually. Beginning of all of this, coaching and mentoring and consultancy budgets tend to dry up, and I sort of struggled a little bit. But now with well-being and sort of equality, diversity, inclusion being kind of at the forefront of people's minds, I'm seeing a bit of an uptick and been involved in some great programs recently. So yeah, sort of shades of light and grey, really. That's kind of how I'm feeling.
I guess it's one of those things that we'll only know some time from now, and we'll maybe discuss this shortly as we discuss how we all have been this week. But whether having a child in lockdown has been horrible because it's been locked down and it's been terrible. Obviously you've got an older child, so you can compare it to some extent, or whether it's actually been a nice distraction and a good thing that you've been forced to spend that time with your baby or whatever. I guess we're beginning to move into a stage where you can actually make a judgment on that, I guess, rather than just survival, which I suppose in some extent, a literal sense, it's been in the last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has been really nice to have the quality time and be around 24/7 for the family. In terms of support. For every sort of milestone that Zachary's been through, I've been there to see it firsthand, and that's been really fantastic, actually. And as I say, been very positive for me as a personal experience. But appreciate it's not been like that for all. But yeah, it's been good.
We'll come back, touch on that in a tick. But Ian, how have you been this week?
I'm good.
How are you?
How am I? Yeah.
I don't know how you've been all week. I want to know, how are you?
I'm good. I'm as Ethan said, I think it's definitely feeling an upturn in interest in coaching, well-being-ish side of things. I've got a couple of unsolicited things through LinkedIn this week, really interesting sort of potential projects. Really, really nice to kind of get that real sense that people are looking ahead and saying, actually, the worst of this in some ways is behind us, and therefore we can build a sort of better future. We can start to tap into some of those things, hopefully, that dads have experienced, and that actually, building a better care of dads is part of that conversation. I had my vaccine call up, so my fear of missing out, I was definitely feeling FOMO. We were getting people all over we got friends in Guernsey, everyone getting vaccinated, Wales, people getting vaccinated of our age, and then suddenly, bang, bang, I'm booked in. I'm feeling excited about that. I don't know why. I mean, it's, never excited about any other kind of vaccination, but I think it feels significant, doesn't it, as we move down those sort of age groups. And tonight is the first time I'll be on a hockey pitch, umpiring for the first time since October, I think it was. So that's quite nice because that's my hobby. So a bit of Friday night action in Bromley. So or Beckenham, actually, it's technically Beckenham, Bromley and Beckenham Hockey Club.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. Good. What about you, James?
Well, very much mirroring your experience, apart from the Friday night action in Bromley. I mean, that can be a lot of things. I'm talking as somebody from Bromley, and Friday night action in Bromley. That's meant a lot of different things over the course of my
yeah.
Very much mirroring that. I feel flipping brilliant, right? Because as you say, Monday I was allowed to get my vaccine, had it booked. Wednesday I got my vaccine, and I got Moderna. Yes. I got the silver medal one, not the bronze medal AstraZeneca.
Oh, controversial.
No, it's true. It's not controversial. I was out on the golf course on Tuesday night for the first time, and that's partly to do with my back and obviously ongoing back issues that were the long-time listeners of this podcast will be aware are still ongoing and still aren't interesting. But being able to be out and do your hobby and play golf just mentally just made me feel amazing. And then I was at the physio this morning. He was very happy that I've been out playing golf, that everything's looking good on the back front. So had my jab, had a really sore arm. That was weird. Like I couldn't lift my arm to 90 degrees to my body because it was so sore. That was weird. Like, I thought it might be a bit tender, but I wasn't expecting that. But not knocked out by the vaccine. Like my partner had AstraZeneca on Tuesday night, and she was completely wiped out on Wednesday. But all right now. I think just from what we've all said, it feels like the overall feeling is that the future is here, that for the first time in a year you can start looking forward and planning things and thinking about things. You can plan to play hockey, to play golf or whatever without thinking, oh, maybe it's going to get shut, maybe I'm going to catch something, yada yada yada. It just feels a lot more positive than it has for a long time, and I suspect if you were mental enough to go back and listen to all the previous episodes of this podcast, this is probably the most positive we've ever sounded.
Oh, great.
Definitely. There were some dark moments. In June.
There were, like you both shared in terms of sport, that's always been my release, but I sort of forgot it, with all of this craziness. And it was my birthday recently. My wife bought me a tennis membership to the local club. And so I'm going to make sure I go once a week now in the evening just to join the group training session and have a few hits with people, because you're just finding yourself, aren't you? And it's really important as dads that we remember who we are as people and, individuals. Otherwise, I think you kind of lose yourself a bit, don't you? That's what I'm detecting here. We're sort of all of us describing, kind of remembering who we are and enjoying those aspects of our personalities coming through.
Yeah, and I think particularly for men and dads, there is an element of, rightly or wrongly, and I suggest probably wrongly, and we've again probably discussed this on the podcast, the idea that somehow as the man, as a dad, you're responsible in some way for your family, and that's been particularly the last year. That's been quite a strong thing amongst a lot of people, I think, and hopefully we're sort of beginning to, as you say, leave that behind. You can start thinking about yourself, and that's something we discuss over and over again about putting yourself. Let's talk about the path. Let's talk about the path to fatherhood. You've got 2 children, Ethan.
Yes.
Well, let's face it. Your path to fatherhood is unusual. I think it's fair to say, and I don't mean that in any pejorative way. Because you're a trans dad, because you went through a transition while you were working for a big bank, and then you embraced flexible working as part of that, and then as part of your identity as a dad. Identity, is that the word? As your experience as a dad, you've embraced flexible working as part of that, so you can spend more time with your kids. Is that something, do you think of yourself as a trans dad, or do you just think of yourself as a dad?
It's funny, actually, my wife and I were talking about it recently, when you completed your transition, which I have, what are you then? Are you still trans? Are you still transient? Are you still going through that journey, or, what's the word you describe when you finished it? And it's an interesting one. I don't think there's kind of the language for it, but in terms of how I just describe myself as a dad, just a regular dad. And like you say, it was a very interesting path for me, in that my sort of being propelled into being, when my wife and I got married, we then had the discussion about wanting to become parents, and we knew that our path would be slightly alternative to kind of the norms. And so we went to this fantastic show in London, the Alternative Parenting Show, and we found out what it would take, and it was IVF was the kind of route that we had to go down. But then just by realizing then when we started to talk about what would we call each other, you would be mummy or mum, and what would I be, and just couldn't solve that puzzle. So then it made me face up to the real challenge, which had been my life to that point, which was that I was trapped in the wrong body and it just didn't align with my mind. So I had to sort of confront that fear and do something about it and change my entire identity, to make it fit, because actually it wouldn't be fair to bring a child into this world if that wasn't resolved for me. I think, first and foremost, me as an authentic dad, or as a person, in fact, is just really important to have that relaxation and comfort in my own skin, to then be able to be a better parent as a result. So yeah, it's been quite an amazing journey, and like you say, flexible working has been a big part of it, taking 1 day a week with my daughter, who's now 4.5, until she was 3. So that was fantastic opportunity to learn as a father. And yeah, it's for me, big moment was hearing the word daddy, because it just had such resonance to me, to actually hear it from her. And now Zachary started to say dada, and it's just lovely to get it again. It's just really magical moments for me that just have that additional weight from what I've been through.
You talked about sort of feeling trapped and the sense that talking about parenthood was a catalyst for addressing it. How much had you and Emily sort of talked about that feeling of being trapped sort of early in your relationship? When did it come up? Because I'm fascinated that obviously it's not just about you, it's about her and your relationship together, isn't it?
That's true. Yeah, no, it's a great question, actually. It's funny because it's something that I kept quite concealed, because I was too embarrassed, and I actually thought, is this my issue? Or, I didn't know that there was anybody out there like me until I started to YouTube and Google and find, I just Googled, I think, male trapped in female body, and then all these acronyms, FTM, female to male, came up, and transgender came up. So I wasn't even aware myself until I was in my late 20s that there was even a way out. But in terms of the relationship, we met at university, and we went traveling after we graduated around the world together. And when we came back, she split up with me, because she said, I can't do this anymore. I feel like I'm straight. And it was just like a knife to my heart, because I hadn't really ever spoken to anyone that actually I felt this way, and that was really me. But anyway, long story short, we got back together and I shared with her my true identity. And yeah, we didn't really then come back to it until we were in our mid-20s, and I'd proposed, and she was willing to sort of share her life with me as I was in my previous body. And but then I guess both of us, and we talked about this recently, we both unconsciously knew that there was this bigger thing, that we needed to talk about at some point. We just probably brushed it under the carpet somewhat. And then as you say, parenthood, for us, that discussion around it, and actually having a new kitten, and my parents actually saying, oh, look, 2 mummies. It's actually my cat's fault, actually made us really just address it more full on, and I say do the research, and then realize that there was a path for me, and how much better do I feel now, like, James's question about how I identify, I'm just a man, I'm just a dad, that sense of being okay in myself is just so, it's just a weight lifted. Which I'm sure is conveyed in the way I parent.
I mean, how much, and this is, it's difficult. All right. I find the best way to be an ally is to make it about yourself. Yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll make it about me. No, but there is an element of that. In that, what we have in common here is we're all dads, and we want to talk about being a dad and being a dad in the pandemic. But having you on obviously is an opportunity to talk about being an ally, if you like. And one of the tricky things I find, and it's really tricky because I'm sort of putting it on you, and I don't want to, but I'm also putting on. I'll explain. Yeah. One of the trickiest things about trying to be an ally is that it shouldn't be on you or whatever you want to call it, marginalized group to explain their issues, or to have to talk about it, or to say, this is how you are, and you shouldn't have to explain to me how to be an ally. The work should be done by me, and yet you're here, so it feels like the best way for me to find out is to ask you.
Please do.
How does that impact you? Again, it comes back to the identity thing, I suppose, and that I'm saying, all right, you are trans. You are the whole of trans. Can you explain it to me?
And I don't have all the answers.
Exactly. And is that basically a massive pain in the ass, or is it something that you're sort of happy to take on to some extent, or you'd rather just, move on? As you say, you're a man, you're a dad. Why keep going back to something that's to some extent in the past now?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's an interesting one because, I've never been like hugely, flag flying, I'm not sort of a campaigner or a lobbyist, or I'm not, to that extent, fighting all the time for trans rights, although I passionately believe in it, of course, because that's who I am. But yeah, I think that the responsibility doesn't just lie with the allies, actually. I think it is a matter of people like me being, feeling empowered enough and able to share their stories. I think that's what it's all about. And it links to some of the work I've been doing in sort of reciprocal mentoring, in that, I'm working with the BAME population at the moment, and getting them to mentor and coach upwards at the executive level. And I've made that point exactly, that it's not, the burden's not on you to solve this problem. This is everybody's issue, and it's something that should be shared and balanced out. And I think it's just the typical kind of coaching way of being, isn't it? Asking the open questions, and those people not feeling a burden. I don't feel a threat, you asking me a question, but just being happy to share anecdotes as to what my life's been like. But I don't think that I'm anything remarkable. I kind of feel quite strongly that I want to sort of normalize this, and not make me kind of some token trans man, or put a label on me, because actually I've kind of gone through all of that now, and I just want to be accepted for who I am and what I've always given to the world. I don't know if that answers it at all, but yeah, I think it's a sharing piece, really.
Yeah, I think that's the fundamental thing, is it's open conversation that comes from the right place.
Exactly. Well intentioned. Yeah, yeah.
But anywhere near the social media, coming from the right place is the crucial part of that. Don't be a dick, isn't it? I mean,
exactly. I mean, there's a lot of misunderstanding and hatred out there, which has just come from sort of beliefs that people have gathered evidence, but not actually speaking to somebody that's lived through things. But it's not just trans. It's, with anything in life, right? You need to, find your own balanced argument by, gathering the facts and speaking to people about it, rather than make judgments without substantiation. So.
I was going to say, I was actually, you coming on this podcast, Ethan, was a catalyst for a conversation I had just, a couple of hours ago with a client of mine, and I was talking about you coming on, and we were talking about diversity within his business, and it's a relatively small business, and not very diverse, more diverse actually racially than it is on a gender basis. And then I explained that you were coming on and what we're going to talk about, and he said, "Oh, well, that's really interesting, because one of my daughters, who's 16, 17, is sort of said she feels like she's non-binary." And so we had a conversation about how that felt for him as a dad, and he was kind of learning things and learning how to interact in a different way and be much more thoughtful about his interactions with his daughter, because she was expressing in sort of something different outside of his experience. So we were, it was actually, I know you don't want to be put on a pedestal, but just by the fact that we were going to have this conversation, it then opened up a conversation that we wouldn't have otherwise had. So I think there's something there.
That's wonderful to hear, and I think I'm always aware of the knock-on effect of these conversations, like you say, just having a wider audience. But also, you think of my mother and father are head and deputy head in a school, and they've, from being a parent of mine, felt my dad's gone on a big journey, and they're now talking to parents and helping support networks within the school to help children that are identifying in different ways. And so the knock-on, it's just amplified. My sister's having conversations with her friendship groups, my wife's having conversations in her organization, and we're talking to my children all the time about various identities being acceptable and just being new. And so I just think it's not just the one person, is it? It's like you say, everything around it.
It's ripples.
It's the ripple effect.
These ripples come out, don't they?
Just a couple of things before I want to move on. First of all, are your mum and dad head and deputy head in the same school?
Yes. They are. My mum's the head. I did go to that school, yeah. Yeah, and my daughter's been to the nursery as well. It's all a bit ancestral, but yeah. No, it's my mum's been there 42 years, 20 years as head this year. But my dad recently joined in the last sort of 5-10 years.
I don't know how he got that job.
Yeah. Well, they started there. It's a long story. They started there as PE teachers 42 years ago. My dad left when we were born to do other things, and then he rejoined recently, became the special educational needs coordinator, and then he's become deputy. And it's all a bit, it's a family-run affair.
That must have been hard, though. It must have been hard going to school if your mum and dad are
it was knocking on the staff into.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I got treated differently. Yeah.
I've changed the tone now, but I'm going to just briefly nip back to the previous topic, just because, again, Ian said he was talking to somebody. Bizarrely, I got a message from an old friend who I haven't spoken to for ages last night. This is quite spooky in a way. And it said, "Help me understand the trans right dispute, please, James."
Oh,
and
really?
Then went on about, because he thought I'd know better. And there's some points he makes, which I don't want to go into it and discuss it here.
Yeah.
But I would suggest my answer to him will be is go and talk to some trans people. Go and don't talk to me. I can't. I mean, I'm happily. I don't think I can explain it better than somebody who's actually lived it. I think that's probably the answer, isn't it? Is if you really want to understand this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's like with any. There's been lots of press, hasn't there, publicity around certain issues, and I saw in today's news around sort of the protective belief around gender identity in employment law terms, and I think in all of these cases it would be really good for the people concerned to speak to people that have had the lived experience and not make judgments before actually understanding it fully. I think that's just a starting point in anything in life, and something I'd encourage, and I happily speak to that person or whatever. I'm always very open to share. So yeah.
Keep off social media. That's right. Keep off.
Exactly.
You won't get any insight.
No.
I mean, literally no insight whatsoever. Talking about allyship in general, I mean that obviously is a part of your coaching is around a sort of more inclusive culture. Yeah. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's about allowing those voices to be heard at various different levels in organisations, and ensuring that people have a platform to share from and to talk from, and yeah, as I say, the reciprocal nature of the way that we're working just kind of cuts the typical hierarchical sort of power dynamics that are at play in a lot of organisations, and turns that on its head, and creates that openness and that respect for one another in the culture.
And where do you think dads fit into that? We talk about an inclusive culture. As Ian will testify, I suspect that dads are not necessarily thought of as part of that. In terms of D&I, dads aren't necessarily thought of as part of the equation, but I'd suggest that they are. Would you agree?
I would totally agree, and something I've talked about recently with a colleague of mine that I think I'm just so fed up with siloed thinking, and these sort of pockets of employee networks or business resource groups or whatever you call them, and actually that intersectionality is really important. And so if you've got a women's group, invite dads along, and if you've got a dad's group, invite mums along, but actually parents and different perspectives. I just think just opens the dialogue up, doesn't it? That's just a natural way of thinking that I think is progressive. And I don't think we're ever going to solve. I was part of LGBT plus groups in banking organizations, and I'd always argue for straight allies to come in on that, and as part of women's groups I was always encouraging men to be involved. And I just for real parity and equality, I think we need the conversation to be inclusive, properly inclusive of all. And
what's your experience been like as a working dad? As you say, you've adopted flexible working. How do you combine the two, essentially? I suppose we're talking about dads and how they need to be included. Obviously because you have certain responsibilities not responsibilities, but you have certain drags on your time.
You become a jack of all trades, don't you? I mean, carer, child psychologist, teacher, entertainer.
And it's your job, obviously, to some extent, to coach people on how to do that well. But then, of course, you've got to do it well in your own life. How have you managed that?
Yeah, I mean, I won't lie and put my hands up that I don't always get it perfectly right. As coaches, we're always encouraging people to actively listen to one another and create open dialogue. But sometimes I can fall in that trap myself. An example last summer, I remember quite a funny story with my daughter. I was picking up from school and just asking her, "How was your day, darling?" And she said, "Oh yeah, we learnt about shoulders." And I just went into socialize mode and said, "Oh, what? Head, shoulders, knees and toes." And I put the playlist on Spotify in the car, and she's getting warm, but "No, Daddy, no." And I thought, okay, I'm going to close this down to save us all a little bit. And then I said, "What else did you talk about?" "Oh, puppies, Daddy." I said, "Oh, great. Baby dogs, how cute," and everything. No, same thing, nearly blew up. Then we got home and I opened her book bag and I realized it was all around learning about the war and VE Day celebrations, and she was learning about the soldiers and the poppy fields. And so the soldiers and and the poppies, and I just felt like such a bad dad. You know, I wasn't listening, I wasn't really tuned into my daughter, and I just think, you know, that's like you say, rush to solutionize and kind of get one step ahead, and sometimes we just aren't present enough. So I certainly can hold my hand up to that, in terms of being a failure at that. But yeah, on the whole, I think that what I always encourage is that we have boundaries and that we ensure that we still building the quality time. You know, that example not being the greatest, but, you know, I always try and make bath time and bedtime, and, you know, some things are just uncompromisable, such as those points in the day, and I try and make, you know, pick up and drop off as much as I can, and, you know, and make the times that we've got together count, and of quality, rather than just sort of constantly on the phone, which I find a real distraction.
Yeah, it's that thing. It's that thing. That distraction thing. I think it's the number one thing. If you can be present, that moments of just concentrating on what they're actually said to you, rather than just go, read. You said, Daddy.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, sorry. So what were you saying? All those kind of elements.
Yeah.
And we've talked quite a lot on this show, Ethan, about that kind of moving back to sort of normal, in inverted commas. I don't want to do the inverted commas, it's way too cheesy, and we've done it before. So going back to normal, or going back into the workplace for those of us who've been working away, what sort of plans have you got for doing things differently than, you know, or structuring your working week in a way that brings in some of those benefits you talked about being largely there, you know, for the family during the pandemic? And as we go back into that, what kind of things have you been reflecting on that you might do differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, as I sort of opened with, there's been some great sort of, I think, good developments in that, you know, we're around more for the family. We're able to sort of witness those key kind of milestones in our family's lives. But, you know, I think to keep that up, I think we do need to be quite planned and strategic about it. And so for me, you know, especially if there's kind of an integration back into the workplace and we're having to do 2 days or hybrid working, you know, 2 days in and 3 days off, it's kind of just still ensuring that, you know, you're I think, promoting flexible ways of working. So asking, you know, people that you work with that actually the 8 o'clock drop off this day and this day is really important, and I won't compromise on that. Please don't put meetings in the diary at that point. And, you know, or, you know, starting the day earlier in some cases, and shortening your day to sort of do pick up at 3 or 4 o'clock and then logging back on. And I just think, you know, that flexibility is what this has given us. It's given us an opportunity, hasn't it, to kind of work in that dynamic way, which we might not have done it in this sort of typical 9-to-5 model. So it's absolutely, as I say, being planned and strategic and strong about your boundaries on that. But I mean, recently I put things on my signature and my emails to say, you know, although I'm emailing it at this point in time, you know, do feel free to email me back at a point which is suitable and respectful of your schedule. And it's things like that, subtleties, that I think do go a long way into creating that ethos and reinforcing that behavior. So, you know, that's kind of a tip as well. But
yeah, that takes us right nicely into the tips.
Oh yeah,
because well, it kind of speaks to what I'll go first, because that kind of very much speaks to my tip. Because one of the things that, you know, in reading Ethan's story and indeed writing it for Working Dads, because you there's a blog all about your sort of transition story, if you like, on I think it's on the Bound Coaching website, isn't it? You can find it.
There is.
One of the things that sort of struck me most was the make a quiet area in the canteen. You know, not the big cultural stuff, and that's important, but also little steps, you know, that can make a big difference. And I think that would be my tip for parenting and for work, is to think about the little practical steps that can make a big difference in life. And email signatures is a classic one. I don't know if it was, I stole somebody's, it might have been yours, Ethan, I can't remember, but I stole, it said exactly that. It was, you know, I work flexibly. I don't expect you to reply to me. You know, I'll email you at whatever time, and I don't expect you to reply to me unless it suits you, sort of thing. I think we may have done email signatures before as a tip, but little steps. I'm desperately trying to think of a little step that would help around, you know, in family life. But there are little steps, I'm sure, that I'll think of some afterwards. You know, little practical stuff that can actually, you know, impact other people more. I suppose it really doesn't affect you very much to do these little things, but it can have a big impact. And again, I suppose it comes back to the ripples we were talking about. It can have a big impact for other people. So Focus on the little things is my tip this week. Who's next? Ethan, have you got a tip?
Yeah, I mean, kind of, we talked about, didn't we, finding kind of ourselves amidst all of this. But for me, I think, to perhaps link to that point that you made about that kind of hyper connectivity that we're in. We're very disconnected, but yet we're hyper connected as a world at the moment. And I think that 24/7 always on thing, whereas in the past, if you didn't answer your phone, you may have popped out for a coffee or grabbing lunch, but you're in the next room now. So people expect you to be there like, all the time and be accountable. And I think that isn't healthy. And so my top tip actually is something that my wife and I introduced recently, which was because our phones were going everywhere, literally like bathrooms, bedrooms, everywhere, and they'd stay by the side table. But what we've done now is we've confiscated our phones from our bedrooms, and it helps us sleep. We put it outside the door on a table on a charging point, and there's no blue light lighting up the room, no notifications coming through. I'm not tempted if I can't sleep to look at it. It's not in the room, it's not even in kind of eye shot. So yeah, my top tip is to literally get some distance from the phone by removing it from your bedroom at night, if you, of course, you do that anyway. So.
No, I don't. You see, I salute you.
You're already ahead of me then.
I know it's a good tip, and I'm like, I know this would be a good thing to do, but I can't do it. It's like, it's awful. But having said that, I've trained myself to play a stupid game called Two Dots. I've trained myself. The minute I open Two Dots, because I tend to play it just before I go to sleep, I immediately feel sleepy. I've managed to train myself.
Oh, wow.
Like a dog, essentially. The minute I open this game, I start yawning, and that makes me fall asleep.
Good for you.
Maybe I should have saved that for another week as a tip, shouldn't I? Ian, what's your tip?
Well, I just want to reflect on the fact I admire Ethan as well for the keeping the phones out of the bedroom. The excuse we have is that it's our alarm as well.
Okay.
Maybe the answer is to buy alarms, but I absolutely, it's the perfect tip. It's one of those things where we all know that it makes sense to do that, but some of us are more resistant than others. I've got a little tip, and it's a little thing, and it's something that came up this week with my son, who, for the first time, he's kind of, since we've gone back from homeschool into lockdown, he's struggled a little bit because there's been repetition of stuff that he already knows, and he gets a little bit bored on some topic areas at school because it's repetition and checking what they know, and it's kind of stuff that happens anyway at school. And he starts saying, I don't want to go to school, which that's not really his thing. But at the same time, that's what happens in the morning. But at the same time, in the evenings, he'll tell you how much he's enjoyed school. So actually, as a coach, maybe I should have come up with this. However, it was Lisa, my wife, who came up with this idea. And she said, well, why don't you get him to write down, at the end of the day, a few good things about the day and a few bad things about the day, things he didn't like. And then he can have that. And when the next day we can reflect on it, and then he can see when he's kind of going, I don't want to go to school because it's really boring. I was like, well, actually, this week these are all the good things that have happened, and we've got something. Is there a pattern in the things you don't like? And can we, maybe we can talk to the teacher and say, well, actually, if you do this, then he'll feel a lot happier. But it's just this little thing, and he's only 2 days in. It's a little reward chart thing related to it. But he's written down. He's done a bit of journaling,
I love
which
that.
is in his own, and he's got one of these. He's got one of these A5 notepads, just for him, and he's written a couple of things on the first page. But so far, so good. Little thing, and he practices handwriting, so everyone's a winner. So that's my tip.
It's a tip
That's genius.
It's a tip with read across as well, because there's a lot of talk about journaling and gratitude journals at the moment. Even I've kept a diary for donkey's years, so I don't really understand it because I've always done it to some extent. But I think. It's a good tip for children, but it's a good tip for adults as well, right?
It is.
Journaling and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. Whenever I work with someone on a one-to-one basis or any basis, I always suggest that they have a notepad that they use just for the coaching process and their thought process. In the same way that I have one for the podcast, which was your tip, James, to have a podcast notebook. So, podcast notebook. Nothing else goes in here. So,
This is an amazing series. That is 2 episodes we've done now, and they've all been really good tips. How long is this going to last? How long do these run? How long are they going to run? How long do I start talking about pants again?
Chocolate biscuits, checking your energy bills.
We're doing well.
We've had some good ones.
Let's keep up the standard.
Ethan, if people want to get in touch with you and find out what you're doing from a work perspective, or just kind of know more about your story, where can they go?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm just Ethan Slathiel, or my website is boundcoaching.co.uk, and I'm also on Twitter quite actively. So yeah, hook me up there.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put the links in the bio and the show notes for that. But thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your story and for talking about dads and lockdown and for sharing the happiness that we all have, that, you know, we are heading into the sunlit uplands of summer and vaccination and doing things. I've also, I didn't say at the start, I've also booked to go out for beers, which I haven't done yet because I've got friends who live in different places around London. So we've worked out when and where we're going to be meeting. So that's another exciting bit of reconnecting with some friends I haven't seen for a while. So that'd be really great. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching and listening. This has been episode number 41 of Lockdown Dads. We will be back in a couple of weeks' time for another episode. But in the meantime, do like and subscribe and share and get in touch if there's anything you want to share with the show, and we can discuss on a future episode. But for the moment, James, thank you for being here. Ethan, thank you very much for being our guest. And we will see you all in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you.